Welcome to the online ministry of La Jolla United Methodist Church, a congregation of faithful Christians right along the Southern California coast. Together, we seek to grow in our individual spirituality and in connected community with one another. All are invited to join in this vibrant faith community. For more information, visit our website at lajollaunitedmethodist.org. May you be enriched in the hearing of these words, and may you receive and enjoy God's blessing.
On the third day after his crucifixion, Jesus rose from the dead and left the tomb. Later in that same day, two of his disciples, one being Cleopas, were walking to a nearby village. Feeling sad and burdened, they allowed a stranger to accompany them on their journey. Our scripture, Luke 24:13 through 25, tells us what ensued on their walk to Emmaus. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" Well, they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us what they had indeed seen, a vision of angels who said that he was alive." Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all the prophets that have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The word of God for the people of God.
What if God is speaking through the songs we already know? Not just in stained glass and sacred hymns, but through the rumble of the radio, the echo of a guitar, the lyric that hits you at just the right time. Sacred text tells us that the Spirit speaks in many languages, maybe even through static, through sorrow, even through stereo. What if we take time to tune in, listening between the frequencies? Because maybe grace is leaking through the speakers. What if God is in the radio?
I heard a story recently about a woman. She went kayaking. She went kayaking off the coast of Florida. Just a brief aside. I have an uncle who used to own a kayak shop in Florida, so this is an experience that seems pretty good to me. So she went kayaking off the coast of Florida. It was one of those beautiful blue sky days. You know the kinds of days I'm talking about? We get them out here in San Diego, where sort of the water glistens in the sun, the horizon feels endless. And she brought a camera with her. She brought, it's modern times, so this digital camera, hoping to capture some photos along the way. And she did. Pictures of birds in flight, of beautiful nature, of waves cresting over the bow of her kayak. A couple of blurry selfies as well. But at some point, the current must have caught her kayak in some way. Maybe she leaned too far, but in some way the kayak rocked, and the camera slipped out of her bag and tumbled into the water. It disappeared. It was gone. Now fast forward nearly 2 years, and there's another kayaker, a stranger, and miles away, this kayaker comes up on the beach and finds something buried in the sand. You've already guessed what it is: a beat-up, waterproof camera. Crusted over with salt and other stuff. It looks pretty hopeless, you can imagine. But out of curiosity, this stranger opens the waterproof case and finds this camera, and importantly finds that there's a little memory card in that camera that he can extract. He plugs it into his computer and finds that it still works. That card has images on it, dozens even short videos. And so this stranger posts a few of those online in the hopes of finding whoever it is who might want to have this card back. And within days, that original kayaker responds. And as you can imagine, she's stunned. Here's something wonderful about that story. That first kayaker, that one who lost the camera, she said that some of those photos meant more to her after this span of time, after these 2 years, than she thought they would have the day that she took them. You see, she'd forgotten what she'd captured. In a way, she'd forgotten who she was at that time. And seeing these photos years later from someone else's hands, she said it was like receiving a message from a previous version of herself. That's amazing. Isn't that fantastic? These are incredible and inspiring moments. These are the kinds of moments where we want to say to the universe, thank you. Gracias, obrigado, 감사합니다. You just want to praise the universe for a second. And you don't often see it when you're in it, right? You don't often know what to call it. But something brings it to you. And you realize that in a way you've been carrying resurrection in your pocket the whole time. That woman wasn't necessarily looking for a revelation. She's trying to enjoy the water. She's trying to capture a few moments and then, move on with her day, move on with her life. But when that camera disappeared, so did the memory. It slipped away just like the camera did under the waves, just like that. Man, if I could count how many times that happens to me, and I wonder if you know how many times that happens to you. Sometimes we're working through something hard. Maybe we lost something we thought would last. We do our best. We generally have a tendency to keep going. Not necessarily because we're okay, but because, standing still isn't an option. And that's the world we live in. That's what the world expects of us, and therefore it's what we expect of ourselves. We keep moving even if we're lost. We put one foot in front of the other, hoping, maybe desperately that something's going to make sense at some point. This week we continue to listen for God's voice in popular music, and this week we're turning to Bruce Springsteen. His song Thunder Road is a song, it's full of emotion, it's full of longing. It's a song of unfinished stories. It's about two people who are trying to figure out if there's still time. Here's a line that stands out to me from the song. The line is, "It's a town full of losers, and I'm pulling out of here to win." And on its surface, it sounds pretty bold. The way I hear it, it sounds pretty vulnerable. Because sometimes walking away isn't pride. Sometimes walking away is nothing more than survival. It's the hope that maybe, just maybe, there's still more ahead. That if an old story doesn't fit anymore, like your only option is to go looking for a new one. It's a thunder road. A road where the flash of possibility comes first and the rumble of confirmation takes its time. Another line is, "Roll down the window and let the wind blow back your hair," which sounds freeing and beautiful. Sometimes it's terrifying. Sometimes it's just numbing noise. Like motion without direction. Like we're pretending that the open road is enough when deep down what we really need to hear is that it's not too late. If you look through the lyrics of Thunder Road, if you receive our weekly email, I always put a version of the song in the weekly email. The song is about longing. The song is about leaving what's broken. It's about saying to somebody else, hey, what else is out there? What if we don't miss it this time? But you know what we're sometimes afraid of? We're afraid we've already missed it. What if what we really long for was right next to us and we let it slip away? I don't know if it's this way for you, but that feels deeply familiar to me. It's like our hopes are entombed, closed off, starting to decay. They get sealed off in a vault of quiet disappointment. And maybe we keep walking, and we're not even sure why. Maybe we carry old wounds, wrapped and covered with bands of grave clothes that are both useless and familiar. And frankly, that's just what we do sometimes. It's what this world expects of us, and so it becomes what we expect of ourselves. And it's in that space that we meet these two disciples. And we understand from the text, and thank you, Tom, for reading, we understand from the text That these two disciples, this is not a moment of courage. This is not a moment of theological clarity. It's that numb kind of emotion that you settle into when you don't know what else to do. They're walking. They're just walking. Staying in Jerusalem, it's too hard. They can't. Have you ever been in that situation? Maybe you're walking, maybe you can't even walk, maybe you're just standing. You can't even bring your eyes up. You can't even look out at the world. Maybe the only thing you can focus on is your shoes, and you'll distract yourself with random thoughts like, what's that little thing on the end of my shoelace? It's an aglet, by the way. I don't know if you needed to know that. Luke tells us that they're talking about everything that happened. I wonder if what they were trying to do was just reassemble the pieces. I wonder if what they were trying to do was just make sense of something that didn't make sense. It's in that mystery that Jesus shows up. Like right there in the middle of it. I mean, of course, still they don't recognize him. And it's not like they don't recognize him because they're faithless. It's not like they don't recognize him because they're idiots. It's not like they never cared about Jesus in the first place. It's because they're heartbroken. It's because they ache. Because when your hopes are sealed off and entombed behind disappointment and doubt and grief, it gets hard to see anything clearly. Springsteen's lyric is informative here. Show a little faith, there's magic in the night. It's this small, subtle whisper that, I don't know, when sometimes what we want, well, it's a subtle whisper when what we want is something obvious. For me, this is vulnerable, and that's often difficult to want the obvious and have to listen for the subtle, for the still small voice, for the strange warming of our hearts. But this is the kind of invitation that the risen Christ offers to these two disciples as he walks beside them unnoticed. Professor Clinton McCann writes, the Emmaus disciples had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. The suffering and death of Jesus were to be understood not as an ultimate defeat of God's purpose, but as the necessary pathway to new life. The risen Jesus illumines this for his disciples by appealing to the teachings of Moses and all the prophets, indeed by drawing on the lesson of all the scriptures. It's futile to attempt to identify specific passages. The pattern of life emerging from death is, in fact, a fundamental pattern of the entire biblical saga. So Jesus walks with them. He listens, he teaches. And do they see it? Nope. Well, not yet. Because they'd been walking in such loss that even the miracle of resurrection felt too far away. So Jesus keeps walking with them. Jesus listens, he teaches, but as the pattern seems to be with the disciples, they still don't get it. And let's be clear that Luke's not kind to the disciples. On the other hand, maybe that's understandable because, I don't feel like resurrection necessarily registers in real time. It doesn't come with clarity. It doesn't arrive with certainty. Sometimes it's just got to break through. And that sense of breaking through, that's how they finally recognize Jesus. It's in the breaking of the bread. When he's with them at the table, he takes that bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and that's when their eyes are opened. On one hand, they're not argued into it with a particularly persuasive Facebook post. On the other hand, they're not awed by something that their eyes see but their brains can't explain. It's something small, it's something intimate. It's a gesture that they'd seen him do before. Iowa pastor Shannon Michael Pater writes this: in a moment of tangible love that embraces the brokenness of betrayal and cross, the rays of Easter sunrise have illumined the crypt of their entombed hopes. Broken bread nurses our broken faith and can nourish the courage we need to leave our grave clothes leave our grave clothes behind and vacate the vault of our defeated dreams. The weary travelers feel alive. Their hearts are renewed. The witness of the women at the empty tomb is now their testimony too. In the breaking of bread, the beams of resurrection's dawn have reached about 7 miles from Jerusalem. It's not a lightning bolt. It's not some big emotional turnaround. It's a whisper. It's something sacred, and they almost missed it. And I feel like that's part of what Thunder Road gets at, too. It's not just a road out of town, but it's a question: what if we don't miss it this time? What if hope is walking beside us, even when we don't recognize it yet? Springsteen sings, "Show a little faith, there's magic in the night." And that's a lot like what happens with the disciples. The road hasn't changed, but now the road means something more. Because now, on that same road, at least I imagine the same road, they're not just walking with their heads down, they are running back. Back to the others, back to the story. Back to those who are still lost in their grief, not yet realizing that they'd never been alone. And so they go, and that's the final movement of this story. It's not just recognition, it's response. I say some version of it every single week. Our response every single week is essential. It matters. It's necessary. The disciples don't stay at the table. They don't stay in comfort. They run. Friends, resurrection isn't a private gift. It's something you carry back and something that reshapes the road behind you and the community waiting ahead. It must be. There's power in this. And we get a glimpse of that power in the song too. It isn't just about leaving, it's about invitation. The narrator's not running away. The narrator's asking someone to join him, come with him. Knowing that the road isn't easy, because my friends, don't we know the road isn't easy? The narrator knows he can't be walked alone. And that's what resurrection does. It walks beside us. It calls us to walk with others. When the singer sings, "It's a town full of losers," I mean, sure, it sounds pretty dismissive, but maybe it's compassion and honesty. Maybe it's framing what we all carry in a way that's both deeply theological and deeply meaningful. Imagine a Messiah who meets us in the places that we're tempted to run from and walks along with us until we're brave enough to turn around. The gospel isn't just good news on this lonely road. It's good news for those that we return to. The ones who didn't see the breaking of the bread. The ones who haven't yet felt the fire. Professor Molly Marshall writes this: "Surely Luke 24 offers an emerging Eucharistic theology. Hospitality expresses deep vulnerability. Welcoming a stranger is always risky. Jesus becomes the host at this meal, which becomes an expression of thanksgiving and deepened faith. Christ joins himself to those on the way, who then make space for him in the village. What they had experienced must be shared. News this transforming creates new community." And isn't that part of the resurrection miracle? It makes witnesses out of wanderers. It builds community from broken stories. It sends us back transformed to the life that is still unfolding and that God is still calling us into. So maybe these moments of confusion and ache and loss, those moments when we find ourselves wandering, maybe it's not the end of the road. Maybe it's a transition point. Maybe it's even a beginning. Maybe it gives the road meaning. Maybe it reorients us. Not just toward what's ahead, but toward what we couldn't even see clearly the first time. Think about that camera. That camera found by a stranger years later turned out to be a whole lot more than a dirty block of burned out electronics. It was more than memories, it was experiences brought back frame by frame in the hands of a stranger. And suddenly those images meant more than they did on the day they were taken. Because they reminded that kayaker of who she was, and maybe even of who she still could be. I wonder if that's part of how grace works. Who we still could be. Maybe we are still worthy. Maybe we are still created in the image of God. Maybe what we thought was gone isn't. Maybe grace gives us back what we didn't know we needed. And Thunder Road, like I said, I don't think it's about escape. I think it's about longing. It's about reaching for that moment where you roll down the window and let the wind blow back our hair and invite someone to come with us. Is the road clear ahead? I don't know. Will the pain go away ever? I don't know. But maybe in that moment, something in you is ready to believe again, ready to hope again, ready to go back, if that's where grace is calling, or to go forward if that's where Christ is walking. Maybe both.